Hey everybody, I got another video for you today, and today we're going to look at the business aspect of creating software in the low-code, no-code space. So you probably fit into one or two camps, and that's either a citizen developer, which means you don't have much traditional development experience, which also means you probably haven't gone through any of the more strategic approaches on how you would go about to write some type of software. So let's just say you've taken one or two or more projects on and you're really good at the low code, no code tool. And so everybody comes to you for, whatever the output is that they want, and you're starting to get more and more requests. Well, now you kind of need to formalize what it is that you're doing, right? And so these are some of the approaches that I'm going to discuss with you that are used in traditional software development. Now, this isn't any particular methodology. This is me just trying to provide some guidance and some best practices, as well as try to give you at least some structure. So if you have no structure, no starting point, this is meant to give you the starting point, okay? And so I think if you follow these steps, you will get a good response from the business, because these are the people that are coming to you to build whatever software. And even for those of you that are seasoned developers, I've worked on a lot of teams, and so some of these practices may help improve. So feel free to use the pieces that you need to. I don't want to start a debate by saying this is empirically the way to do it, or have you send comments to me saying, well, that isn't right. This, it's just information, guys. And so you should use it in a way that is meaningful and that makes sense to you. Just anything you don't like, remove it. Anything you like, adopt it. That's it. And that's all we're trying to do here, is just to make people happier, more productive, and that really should be the goal in life about everything. So getting started, what we want to do is we want to look at what's called the phases of application development. Now I can summarize this very quickly by saying, irregardless of your experience level, you want to approach software from the ground up. And the reason that you want to do it from the ground up is the same way that you would build, say, a house, or even a skyscraper. You wouldn't start with the roof and then build the walls and then build the floor, and then after all of that's done, come in and jack all of that up so that you could lay down the foundation. No, you start with the slab, you put the foundation on, or the footers, or even before the foundation, you may even put in, I'm not in construction, so I don't know what it's called, but I think they're called footings or pylons. Anyway, there's structure points underneath the foundation to make sure that if it's soft or whatever, it won't sink into one area, and it'll make the foundation solid. But the point is, if you have a solid foundation from which to build upon, then everything that comes after that just becomes a better portion of something that's already solid, right? Or at least that's the hope. And so when you look at software development, what you want to do is you want to start with 0, 1, right? DB module or DB model. And so basically this is fields that are going to be required of the business to capture information for a particular process, right? So talk to them about their process. What are they doing? And they may say, well, I do this, then I do that, right? Create a Visio diagram and connect block A with block B. And if there's a decision, put a decision tree in there, and then try to figure out where do you go from there. Now, at each of those steps where you notice they're collecting information from something, a user, a system, or whatever, get the specific details. What specifically are you collecting? And if they have examples, take that in. These are your fields, guys, okay? And so now you start to identify entities in the real world, and you'll try to figure out what it is that they need, and you'll make a table with the columns associated with it. When you have a collection of tables and you have all of the columns, now you just need to figure out how do they fit together and how will you kind of structure your data. And so that's what that's all about. Next thing you got to deal with is something called an API, or the controller layer. This is responsible for facilitating communication from the database, the container, the storage mechanism, into getting and sending and receiving information to the user's interface, which is one other layer up on 3. So even if you're not doing an API, what you want to think about is also direct connect to the database, stored procedures, views, things of that nature, like how can I get to what I need to get to with the least amount of noise, And if you have a table with, say, I don't know, something ridiculous like 50 columns wide, right? But your application may be only going to use or need to use a screen that's going to have 4 or 5 of those columns, make a view, right? Only bring back the information that you need for that particular section. Don't bring all of that information in a request, not use it, and then just pick and use the 4 columns. That could lead to performance problems. So anyway, think about that controller layer, about how that might look and how you may need to send information to and from that database that you just created. And then, of course, 3 is your structure. This is wireframing, making sure the customer agrees to or likes the layout, or better yet, what the user experience is going to look like and or feel like for them. Maybe they don't like the way the application flows. The data may be right, the data may be good, the APIs may be good, but they just don't like the way that it looks and or the way that it feels, right? Maybe it's clunky. Maybe you've got too many steps, too many clicks. And obviously that goes into good UI, UX design, or user interface, user experience design, is think about the user. Don't make them suffer. Don't make them click needlessly. Don't make them go through extra steps that they don't want to. They're all people, your people, right? You want accelerators in writing code. You want quick IntelliSense to kind of help you do what you need to do. And business users got things to do as well. They don't want to spend time monkeying and fiddling with software just to get data into a system or to create a report, a filter of what they want to get out of it. So think about that. Think about them and how that experience is going to make their experience with the software better, which will make you look better as a developer and or a team. All right, finally, you know there's going to be some sense of automation, maybe also integration, things of that nature. You know, what external systems does my software or the data need to talk to? Are users doing things monotonously again and again and again? If so, can that be automated? There's lots of automation tools. There's things even in SQL Server back in the day before automation was even called automation. That you can just set up a scheduled timer to run, and at set intervals this process essentially kicks off. So think about that. How will that look? And you're going to want to document all that. And then finally, you want to look at the software's performance. Is it laggy? Is it taking too long in one area or the other area? And you need to have the ability and have tools within your platform to be able to monitor this. The other thing you need to do is monitor for uptake. Maybe the users aren't using the product because it sucks to them, in their opinion, and you think it's great, but you notice that people aren't using it. And you dig into why they're not using it, and you really find out they don't like the user interface. It's hard to use. They can't understand it, or whatever the case may be. But in any event, that's why this is essential to having software be successful in your organization. Now, the next thing I wanted to show you is a template that I've created for you guys, and you'll be able to assimilate this. And again, this is a launch pad, a starting point for you. This doesn't mean this is the all be all, but this will give you the basics to get started, okay? And so what are we going to do here? There's a nice little pretty page, and we got a table of contents in here. But let's kind of dig into each one of these. So as we're going through what we just talked about, now we're into the documentation. So your application title goes at the top, and then introduction. And this is really important because this is like an executive summary in a business profile, or kind of a what is a business going to do, that kind of stuff. And so the introduction serves for the developer to read this technical documentation to understand from the business perspective, what am I building? What is this thing going to do? And so you want to talk about what is the primary function and what is the goal for this application. So they get that high level 50,000 foot view and understanding. Next, in there include about the application, what is it going to achieve for them? What problem does it solve? You know, it's got a goal, right? But what is it actually meant to solve, or what is it meant to do, right? Again, that 50,000 foot view, and you want to tie that together. Next thing about the general expectations, right? So you've got an understanding of the primary function, you kind of know what problem it's going to solve. And so that should essentially write itself, right? But if there's additional expectations or something else that maybe isn't covered in the preamble of the 2 previous paragraphs, include a brief synopsis of additional type of expectations that might need to be covered there. The other thing too is almost like a legal document. You want to put any buzzwords, nomenclature, anything specific as it relates to this app or as it relates to that particular business. You know, there's lots of things in cultures that mean something different from company A versus company B. And there's these buzzwords that usually the company or the business likes to use. So go ahead and document those here because it's that type of nomenclature specific to that organization as well as maybe your project. All right, now the next thing that you want to do is you want to document your database structure thoroughly because the developers need to understand, past the high-level 50,000-foot view, now they need to know, okay, listen, how am I going to capture this information? And so this was the part where you started talking about their workflow, got the field names, putting them into tables, and then you're relating that tables, and essentially that thing comes together to solve that business problem and to meet the expectation. So you want to describe each and every table and specifically what is it meant to house, what is it meant to accomplish. And so that helps the developer understand what exactly is going to be needed in these tables. The next thing that you want to do is create an entity relationship diagram. That's what you see here. Now, I use SQL Server Management Studio. That allows me to create the tables, set the data types, and then I can go into the graphical designer diagram and I can create it. And I just simply can drag column A to column from table A to column table B. This creates a foreign key, primary key relationship between the tables. And it's super, super important because now we've got good third normal form or data optimization, and in some cases we may have one-to-many relationships, which is what you see here, and then we have a one junction table which serves as a many-to-many relationship. One thing that I didn't depict here, but in your database design, I want you to think about this. And this is not necessarily this is really a one-to-one relationship. So let's just talk about a table that has a lot of information, and maybe you're storing binary information about a file, right? And maybe it's many files, or maybe it's just one file. I don't know what it is, but bottom line is there's a piece of information in a table that makes that particular record very heavy, very big, very fat. It affects performance. So what you can do is you create a one-to-one relationship. Simply just take the single table that you would normally have and you would split it out between two tables. And then you just create a reference. So in the application, when you don't need to load in all of that heavy data, you simply just call it on demand. Maybe you only grab it when you need it, and you can get it through that extra table, that extra link. Think of it like metadata to the main table or supporting table. So I didn't show that here, but I did want to at least mention it in this video. Okay, next, the application actors and function. Now this is super important because it goes back to the business. It has to do with their workflow process specifically, right? And the nomenclature in their business, in their division, in their department. Maybe it's cross-departmental, but the point is that now it's a culture thing, right? And this is the buzzword. Talk about the process. Use the terms that the business uses and write that into the documentation so the developer understands that so that they can think about it in those terms as well. Maybe there's an initiator, we've got an auditor, a manager of an auditor, a buyer, a financer. Okay, so I used kind of an inventory management theme on that, but just apply it to your business. Whatever those people or roles are called, sometimes it's the title that they hold, other times it's some made-up word that the company uses. But in any event, the point is document that here so you know what the actors are in that particular workflow that maybe the low-code, no-code application is meant to solve for that problem. So that's very, very helpful. Another thing is about identified workflows. Now, you got to think about it. Think about, first we do this, then we do that. If it's not documented, you should document it. You should include it and put a verbal or a written form version of what a Visio diagram would be. Write it out and make sure you write each and every one of them out. And then a little preamble or a paragraph above that would be helpful that says, okay, this workflow is meant to whatever, and it comes up in these situations, right? So that'll help you with writing the code and or the logic where those screens are involved or how that data is related, or are there any other automations that need to happen? behind the scenes, that kind of thing. This is an exercise in not only discovery and in documentation, but really to give you a good deep understanding of creating a product for the business that is absolutely, delightful to use. All right, now let's talk about the application scopes. So this is somewhat hand in hand with the identified workflows as well as the actors, right? So this is kind of where you're going to put all this together. Now think about the application experience, the UI UX. Talk about scopes of the applications, areas, pockets, regions, screens, whatever. Find logical ways of grouping areas or sections of your application to fulfill that function, to fulfill that role, or where this workflow is needed. And so design your application with that high-level thought process in mind. And if you do that, that's great. Now, maybe you want to take and go so far as to create a Visio diagram, and I've created an example here where you've got a publicly accessible area of your application. You may have a back-end area for private management. You may have another third area that has to do specifically with just system administrative stuff, maybe backing things up, integration components, or syncing of data manually. All those types of things could be done in the back-end system administrator. A manager couldn't necessarily fill both roles, but then, the point is you need to have separate areas of the application, because when you do that, you can start applying role-based authentication to these types of designs. And then the other thing is any approvals that they have going on, you want to make sure you include those approval paths, and then also any automation events that need to happen, include that there. Finally, let's look at the final piece where you should document, at least to the point of where and obviously as you come into new things or learn about new things, you just update the document. It should be part of your change management process and procedure. So you're going to automate, you're going to integrate, and chances are you may synchronize with additional information outside of this system that you're developing. Document every single piece of that as to what's what, who's A, B, C, D, all that stuff. And then, of course, talk about reporting. Ask the end users. Okay, now we got all this information. You put what is the word or the expression? A labor of love or passion of entering all of the data. Not that it's enjoyable, but in any event, they're putting all of this information in. Inevitably, they're going to want to get it out sooner or later. So the question is, how do they do that? What do they want to see? From what perspective? And it should help you when you went through the ideas of the roles, the goals, the objectives. It should almost write itself. So you probably will have a really good understanding of what the report needs to have. But use that information by coaching them, saying, okay, we understand X, Y, and Z. We think reporting should have this. What are we missing? Ask them that question. Or just say, what do they think? Now, if you do that, it puts the onus on them, and that may make them feel uncomfortable because maybe they don't really know. And anyway, you should at least always provide some sort of starting point, which is the purpose of my document and what I'm doing here for you guys. I'm giving you a launching pad, some place to at least begin from. You may not like or agree with everything I have in here, but it's much better than you starting with nothing. And so this is, again, it's a starting point, right? And so when you see something, you can definitely say, yeah, I like that. I don't really care for that. But you didn't know what you liked or you didn't like until you saw it first, right? So you got to think. Same thing just for the end users as well. So create some sort of mock-up report, right? This is something I grabbed off the internet. I can do this easily in Power BI. Matter of fact, that's what the screenshot is here. And so you can mock up with just some mock-up data or something, put something in here. And even if you don't have real data, maybe showing a showcase of KPIs and controls and bar charts and line charts with this to show them kind of what's possible, because that provides a conversation. Again, they see what they like, they know what they don't like, and you're going to get that feedback. It's much better to get what they like and don't like at this stage of the process than having spent weeks and several sprint iterations creating something that they think they hate to the most part. Maybe 80% of them. They don't like these lines. Maybe they want pie charts, right? So with Power BI, it's real easy to swap that out. But you get my point, right? You don't want to spend all this energy developing something that they don't think is good. So get as much information on the front side as you can. And then this is the very end of it, right? Additional considerations as you go through all of this. You're going to identify risk factors or risk points, and you should identify them, document them here. And if you have suggestions on how to circumvent or how to solve for that potential problem, that will at least make the developer aware. When the developer's aware, they're going to think reusability. I don't want to write this thing 12 different times in 12 different areas. I need to make this object-oriented or some whatever it is that I need to do to make sure that this is reusable again and again. So you've seen a couple of my videos on Power Platform where you're using components. Great example of that. If you identified a high-risk area, make a component out of that, right? Especially if it's going to be on multiple screens. So it's that type of methodology. And then put a summary statement at the end, anything else that I forgot. Obviously, feel free to add anything else that you want to use in here. But in any event, all of this information is available on my GitHub, and I have a specific area where I talk about and have these files that I showed here in the presentation. So that's it. Nothing really technical, just basically how to make really good software and make sure that you can find a way to connect with the business. That's it for this video. We'll see you in the next one. Have a great one. Bye-bye.